So the no longer hero part you said.
Yes. So that is perhaps the best segue to get into the hero worshipping part.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people feel the need to make others into heroes. We see this everywhere. Any very successful person will have people who follow behind them, calling them a hero. So, some of the perhaps easiest ones to pick up on are most people would consider emergency first responders heroes, as in EMTs, firemen, the people who go into burning buildings to save people. A lot of people
Facts.
consider them heroes.
Facts.
Law enforcement and the army, even though that is some more political baggage there now,
Facts.
most people would still say that they are probably heroes. When you get into really famous artists or really powerful philanthropists or very successful businessmen, people will call them heroes. So Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, plenty of people consider them heroes. And then a number of people who maybe start um, major foundations to take care of people and provide some kind of service. Some people consider them heroes. Most presidents and major politicians, once they retire, start a foundation to take care of some kind of civil society need. And those people are sometimes regarded as heroes.
Mm.
The Clintons were considered heroes by many people for a while, but things have been changing in the past few years, in large part because of politics, but also because of a certain demystification that surrounds people and a real strong sense of disillusionment with politics in general. You're going to find some people who think that the Obamas are heroes, and the Obama Foundation is doing a lot of good work now. There's also the Bush Foundation, which has been doing some work as well. And in a way, it's something that retired presidents do. They start a nonprofit and they open up a library, and
Yeah.
then they just make speeches for the rest of their lives. But then you have people who go out and provide good works that are just maybe ordinary people. Those are called everyday heroes. But those are a different category. In fact, the category of service can just be pushed to the side. Doctors, firemen, you can push them to the side.
Yeah.
The people who are just on the street and they are the ones who run towards an explosion rather than running away, that's a temperamental thing. That is a horizontal sense of hero,
Mm.
the best from among us. And you can probably put them and treat them differently from the hero worship that comes from authority and talent. And that's where we get the Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, the Clintons, the Bushes, the Obamas. That's where you find those people. And I'm pretty sure people thought Mark Zuckerberg was a hero for a while until relatively recently, which we have controversy for.
Yeah.
And I'm sure plenty of people still do. There are people who probably still consider Facebook to be one of the most useful social networking platforms created in human history. And there will still be people who look up to Mark Zuckerberg, pretty much clear across the board. But there are those who buy into, or rather, buy out of that illusion when they're confronted with a certain set of facts. And I think that's what happened relatively recently with Cambridge Analytica. While
Mm.
this is a little bit of a turn from Kanye supporting Candace Owens and Donald Trump, in a way it goes along a pretty similar line of thinking. You have a sense of optimism, you have a sense of respect, because people who consider Kanye their hero don't say that because they think that he is good at music. Heroes are not just talent, it's a comment on character. People probably bought into the idea of Kanye. And the idea of Kanye was what they carried inside of them. And it's something they might have shared with friends online when they were talking about it after a new album came out, new song. And it was in the lyrics, it was in the background noise. And for people who were still in schools, it was probably in every hallway. This kind of constant creation and discussion around an idea. And the man becomes the embodiment of an idea. And when that goes along a fixed path, there are really only two outcomes. The first is that person doesn't do any wrong, and he stays true to himself. And a lot of those people die young. But there are a few people who are able to do that basically from the moment of fame till when they go in the grave. But then there are also those people who end up disappointing. And that is most heroes. Most heroes that come about from a sense of authority, or a sense of respect, or a sense of success. Those kind of heroes typically do not have a very long-term shelf life. Because there's always a sense of betrayal. There's always a sense that something went wrong. And I was very conscious when I invoked George W. Bush earlier. I'm sure there are plenty of people listening to this right now that might have groaned or rolled their eyes when I brought up Bush.
Probably.
Yeah. But a lot of that probably has to do with a real sense of memory being off. George W. Bush, in the days after 9/11, days and months after 9/11, had an approval rating in the 90s, briefly, or at the very least the very high 80s. That's something that never happens with a politician. He was widely respected. He had absolute support. He went from someone of dubious legitimacy because of the election results in Florida, and someone that people made fun of because of his accent, to a very well-respected and powerful world leader with a great deal of international goodwill. Even the invasion of Iraq didn't end that. It just diminished it a little bit. Instead of high 80s, it became 60s and 70s. It was still good. People were still confident, and people still thought that he might have been one of the most effective leaders in the United States in the past 50 years. That changed when the Iraq War began to drag on, when there were failures in the administration of Iraq, when when Osama bin Laden remained uncaptured, when there were problems with Katrina, when there were various comments coming out of the woodwork, when things looked like they were falling apart. That is when George W. Bush fell as an icon, and you saw a great amount of disillusionment. And while he was reelected, it was clear in the second term he was fading in popularity. He wanted to end his various campaigns. It came out more and more often that enhanced interrogation techniques didn't work and had no place, that there were structural problems with the intelligence communities that helped create this idea of a politicized campaign to go into Iraq. There was a failure of trust, and a good deal of goodwill that the presidency and American politics had built up fell. And that was a fallen hero. And now most people look at that and they would doubt that it ever was a hero. Instead, it was just a villain. And that goes to the idea of a betrayal of expectations. There were probably a lot of people who felt like they couldn't, in good consciousness, support certain policy decisions after that, or support certain politicians after that. And there's still a great deal of trauma that many people feel, not just overseas, but also at home, particularly in areas like New Orleans. So that happened, and we can't walk away from that. We have significantly less forms of failures like Cambridge Analytica. And Kanye coming out in support of Donald Trump and Candace Owens certainly isn't of any similar level to that. But it speaks towards the idea of failure and betrayals of expectation. People trusted Facebook as an optimistic organization. When they provided certain guarantees, you took them at their word. And even when things started looking like things were falling apart, you still wanted to trust them. Now no one trusts them. Or at the very least, very few of them do. With George W. Bush, people trusted the United States, trusted in the mission of counterterrorism and going after al-Qaeda and the Taliban. Now there are people who so badly dislike the man that they believe that he planned 9/11 himself. That is the degree of 180. Granted, those people are not many. It's still enough to cause concern.
Gotcha.
So, the failure of an idol, either due to purposeful action or structural changes beyond their control, or just sheer stupidity, happens all the time. And people constantly create them too. No one comes out and says, I am a hero, support me.
Yeah.
Certainly major leaders in various industries never did it. Many of them will actually be very modest and say that I definitely am not. It's a cliche amongst politicians to say, I'm not a hero. The hero are the men and women who serve. It's a cliche amongst those who come home to say that the real heroes are those who we left behind, or those that come back without heartbeats and are inside of wooden boxes. Very common cliches. And they are cliches for a reason, because they have truth to them. And they are instant deflections. And because people hear that enough, they become numb to it. They become numb to this expectation that heroes will say they are not heroes. And so people continue to idolize them, or at the very least provide them more respect than they deserve. It's strange in a way, but people naturally do that. I'm sure when you were growing up, there were people successful in your life, people who did things better than you, or who were more easygoing amongst other people, who had more success than you, and you perhaps idolized them a little bit, or at the very least you respected them more than you probably should have.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. This is something common to people. It's part of, in a sense, growing up, but it's something that continues well beyond growing up. It's part of the human desire to find something to respect as better than themselves. And there are plenty of people that will go out and continually do that. A lot of people are mad with Kanye, not because Kanye as an individual did something they don't like. I'm sure there are plenty of people who would say that anyways, but that's not really true, or at the very least, it's certainly a minority.
Yeah.
Most people think that because they created an idea and they associated that idea with a person. There was a strong amount of hero ideation, hero worship. And then it got betrayed in their eyes. And it was that betrayal that set everything back to square one for them, or at the very least, certainly knocked him down a peg in their eyes. And then there are those that might have actually been the opposite, might have thought that Kanye was a fantastic artist, but couldn't support him because of politics. And now that Kanye said that thing now that he is supporting Candace and Donald Trump, think that, okay, now he is a hero. As in, it can do in reverse. The same way that some people started developing ideas about Kanye after going out and criticizing George W. Bush might now go out and support him for, at this point, supporting Donald Trump. It's
Huh.
a shift. People like to follow certain actions. I can tell you something that probably might make some of your audience mad, or at the very least make them think a little bit. There are those that you don't pay any attention to right now, or there are those that you might like at to a certain point, but you don't really care. If they read a news article that they did something that they agree with politically, at that point, if it's sufficient enough, they'll talk and support it. So there are plenty of people who, in times of discord, would look at a different political party or a different kind of organization, and they'd look for defectors. People that you could look to if they were leaving your side and call traitors, or people on the other side that people could point to and say, here, right is on our side, even their side is leaving them. That happens all the time.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you that there are plenty of people, probably to an extent that no one really wants to admit, that follow certain people on Twitter or social media purely because they did something that they were not expected to do, that they agreed with.